Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Lee from Because He Loves Me. Okay, so today's story is about a pivotal moment in my life with Christ. This was a time in my life where my relationship with Him, I would say now, is definitely on shaky ground. It was when I found myself to be in a situationship. Now, by now, we all know what a situationship is. And no matter what adjective you use to describe it, I'm sure we can all agree that there's no real commitment and this can become very toxic, right? So this story is about God's infinite love and how He delivered me from disobedience, how He delivered me from a toxic cycle of situationships, and ultimately led to me giving Him a complete yes to my journey with Christ. I never thought this would lead to a command that I heard Him say to me to stop having sex. Has God ever told you to do something and you didn't want to do it? Or what about this? Have you ever started to obey Him, but then retracted on that, which pretty much led to disobedience? Yeah, that was me in this situation. So at the time, I was 2 years into just newly being saved. I started to go to church a lot more. I would attend, events at church. I would read my Bible more, my devotional, all those things, right? During this time, I was still dating. I was still having sex. I still was partying. I was still doing all of that. And I found myself in a situationship. Situationships aren't a new thing for me, or they weren't at the time. I met this guy online. I was online dating at the time. He was really cool. We went out on a few dates. Definitely had good conversation. He was attractive. He was intelligent. He was actually going to school at the time, and so was I. So we would study together. So we really just had a lot in common. And shortly after, we became sexually active. You know how it is. And eventually he introduced me to his family. And I remember that same night, after meeting one of his family members, he asked me, did I want to go to the next level? Like, did I want to be serious? And I remember saying, no, like, this is way too soon. Let's just see how it goes. So it's interesting that I, at the time, was hanging out with him. We would spend a good amount of our time together. We would sleep with each other. But for some reason, I wasn't okay with being in a committed relationship with him. Have you ever been in this situation before? You meet somebody, you're vibing, you like them, everything is good, but you weren't quite sure if they were worth the commitment. Yeah, that was me. One of the things that came up with us was that I wanted to take him to church. I wanted to invite him to church. And I remember, we would spend the night together. We would be together from Saturday night till Sunday morning. And I started to ask him, hey, you want to come to church with me tomorrow? And I remember he was saying no, like, nah, I'm good. And I just didn't understand at the time why he wouldn't want to come to church with me. I mean, he said he was Christian. He said his family were Christians. Why didn't he want to come to church with me? Although that bothered me, I didn't cut it off right away because we were having fun. We were actually making plans together for our future. He had invited me to attend a destination wedding of one of his friends. So I was going to be his plus one. We started to consider ourselves, in each other's future. But again, this still had no commitment. I think in the back of my mind, it did kind of bother me that he didn't want to come to church with me. So we just kept it moving, kept going. So as time went on, I started to consider, maybe I do want to be in this relationship with him. I mean, this could actually work. And not too much longer after that, I remember there was a series of instances that started to get to me. So it first started with one of my friends. She had told me that she had recently met a guy online and they decided to enter a courtship, but they were going to abstain from sex until marriage. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's cute. I'm glad you found somebody that you can do that with. And then shortly after that, there was me learning about Ciara and Russell Wilson, and also Meagan and her husband, Devin Franklin, how they had gotten married and abstained from sex. So I was just like, okay, this is weird. This is interesting that these types of things keep coming up. And then shortly after that, I remember having a conversation with a close friend of mine at the time. And she had asked me, I was telling her how I liked this guy that I had been dating, and how I was considering him to be my boyfriend. And I remember her asking me, does he fit where God is taking me? And I remember being like, I don't even know where God is taking me. I know I'm a nurse. Uh, that's a little intense. I haven't even considered that. But her question resonated with me, and it kind of did something to me, because I started to think, like, does this really align with where I'm going? But the real question that I asked myself was, where are you going? Do you even know where you're going? And lastly, I had a dream of that God told me to stop having sex. Now, prior to this, my friend telling me that she was dating the guy and decided to not have sex, then learning about the celebrities not having sex, and even my friend asking me about how this man aligned with my future, those weren't what got to me. But what got to me was this dream, where God in this dream told me to stop having sex. Now, I've always been a dreamer. Even before I was saved, I would dream things and they would come to life. Like, I would see them play out. And at the time I was like, when I woke up the next day from this dream, I prayed to God for clarity. I prayed to God that he would give me an answer, that he would give me guidance with what I feel like I had just dreamt. And that same day I was at work, and my supervisor came to my cubicle with a bouquet of yellow flowers, saying that it was from my grandfather. It was because my grandfather had passed away, and she wanted to give me some flowers. The interesting thing about that was my grandfather had passed away literally like 1 month prior to this, so I didn't really understand. But because I was seeking God for an answer, I immediately thought, God, what is the significance of these yellow flowers, and why would I get them today? After this, I immediately Google searched what the significance was of this yellow color. So I went right to my computer, and what I found was that yellow can sometimes mean faith. It can also mean holiness. And then I know that yellow is also interchanged with gold, which signifies purity. And I knew this was the sign that I had been praying for, but I wasn't quite sold yet. And so that same day, like, all of this happened pretty consecutively. That exact same day, I remember closing a cabinet at my cubicle, and there was a magnet that fell off the top of the cabinet. And on the magnet, it said, "It was then that I carried you." Now, I close this cabinet every single day, and never have I ever had anything drop off of the top of that cabinet. And it was dusty, so it had been up there for a while. But that day, this magnet had fallen onto my desk, and I was able to see, maybe God is really trying to tell me something. For me, this meant that it was time to make a decision. Was I going to be with him, or was I not going to be with him? Now, wait. Why was it that I was still trying to make this become my way, right? What I knew for sure was that this message was very clear: stop having sex. How do you tell someone who you had already been sexually active with that you no longer can have sex? I was afraid, y'all. I was afraid that I would look stupid. I was afraid that I would sound crazy. I was really just afraid. Who does that? Who starts this type of relationship with someone and then backs out and says, God said? I remember knowing what I had to do, which was right, versus what I wanted to do, which was still be connected to him. So I still tried to do it my way. I remember calling him. Once I got the nerve to talk about it, I called him to discuss the status of our situationship. And I remember saying to him, I think we should be together. You know, I think I'm ready now. And this man said no. He said no, flat out, no, I'm not ready. And I'm like, well, how are you not ready? But just a month or so ago, you were saying that you wanted to be with me like that, and now you don't. And I immediately went to what I knew I was supposed to say the entire time was, we can't do this anymore. I said to him, you know, I think I'm going to take a couple steps back. He asked me why. I said, because I don't want to get hurt. And I said, I also think we should stop having sex. And a little bit after that, I mean, things just kind of went along status quo. We still hung out. We still talked. We still studied together, but we were no longer sleeping together. And he told me that he never could see himself being celibate and that he respected my decision. But, you know, that was that. And one of the last times I saw him, I remember us actually sleeping in the same bed together. That was one of the hardest nights of my life, especially at that time, shortly after making a decision to stop having sex. We didn't have sex. We literally had pillows in between us. And looking back, that was the dumbest decision ever. Don't do that, y'all. Don't do that. As the weeks went on, my desire for the Lord started to increase and my desire for the gentleman started to decrease, and eventually we stopped talking. So here is where I want to talk to you about the lessons that I learned through this whole experience. Number one, please know who you are and who you're called to be and what you're called to do before you start dating. 9 times out of 10, you will entertain the wrong person for your present and your future. I'm pretty sure had I given God a complete yes 2 years prior when I had gotten saved for real, I probably wouldn't have found myself in this situationship. The second lesson that I learned was we must always obey God. Always, always, always obey God. And the interesting part about our obedience is that our obedience is also connected to other people. I often reflect back to my decision with this gentleman and how possibly that could have been a seed planted for him to ultimately have given his life to Christ. Perhaps that would have been a breakthrough for him and would have changed his life literally for eternity. You know, the Bible talks about some plant, some water, and God ultimately gets the increase. So perhaps that could have been a seed that someone else had watered because I eventually obeyed God. But we do know also, and lesson number 3 is delayed obedience is still disobedience. Now, I am grateful for the mercy of the Lord that covered me in this situation. So the next lesson that I learned was don't settle for less than God's best. If God is not at the foundation of that relationship, it's not God's best. And the last thing that I learned was the importance of giving God a complete yes. My complete yes and my decision to abstain from God opened so many doors, so many opportunities for me. It led to a very fruitful relationship with God. And I decided that day that I will honor him by honoring my body. And I haven't looked back since. God's plans for our lives is always going to be greater than what we have for ourselves. So it is important to know who you are in him, always obey him, and put him first in everything that you do, and give him your complete yes. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please share it with someone who you think it will bless. Until next time.